Um, I worked with addicts when I was a criminal defense lawyer. Like most families, there have been people in my family with drug addictions. Um, in my work in drug policy, I've gotten to know more people who are either addicts or who are in recovery. One of the most heartbreaking things is to realize that as a society, we've made a great deal of progress in fighting prejudice. People, the public is, increasingly accepting the idea that men and women who are gays and lesbians are, should be able to be in committed relationships with the people they love, that they should be able to live the lives that are true to their character, that men and women who are of different races or ethnicities ought to be able to fall in love and get married and not be a big deal, that the old prejudices around race and ethnicity and gender are breaking down, but we still have a tremendous amount of prejudice around drugs that it's quite tolerable, so that people can speak in public about dope using scum and dopers and losers, and use terms like junkies, and use very, very disparaging, stigmatizing terms to describe people with the disease of addiction, or even people who are just simply using drugs socially and aren't in any way addicted at all. So that we still have a terrible cultural viciousness that we tolerate toward drugs. At one point in the 1980s, as the problem of AIDS was becoming clearer, I heard a member of Congress say in a public hearing, well, we're not going to have to worry about the heroin problem anymore. They're all going to die of AIDS, and that's going to solve the problem.
Oh,
and
my.
you think of how cruel and indifferent to the tragedy that this is. You realize that a member of Congress just couldn't think of someone with a drug problem as their son, as their parent, as a friend.
Sure.
And so you see that this drives, the way in which lots of police, prosecutors, and lawmakers operate, and it's terribly hurtful.
I do have to agree.
Those of us who recognize that drug prohibition, the idea that a person can be sent to prison because of a choice of what they're doing it out of curiosity or experimentation or the pursuit of pleasure or spiritual enlightenment or whatever, those of us who recognize these laws must change need to find more powerful political allies. I belonged to NORML for many years. I'm still a member of NORML. But NORML by itself is never going to be able to end drug prohibition. There are something on the order of 25 million Americans who use marijuana in the course of a year, and NORML has maybe 10,000 members. Most people who use marijuana just are uninterested in getting involved.
Yes, and that's so sad. It really is.
It's what I figured out is that in order to change this law, we're not going to be able to convince it's not going to be a situation where one party becomes the party of liberty or freedom and the other party is the anti-drug party. The Democrats are not going to be our advocates. The Republicans are not going to be our advocates. You're not going to have some narrow vote in the House of Representatives that comes down 211 to 210 because one member is going to courageously vote for the liberty of using drugs. It's not going to happen that way. You're going to have to defuse and depoliticize the issue. It's got to become nonpartisan, and that the perspective that is most likely to do this is the business perspective, that this policy, this drug prohibition policy, is a disaster for the nation's economy. And people who are deeply invested in it, deeply concerned about it, have the most powerful ability to change the minds of members of Congress. When you think about it, go ahead.
Well, no, please.
So when you think about it, we arrest, more than 1.5 million people on drug charges every year. 300,000 people are convicted on state felony charges every year. Probably 10 million Americans have felony convictions just for possessing drugs or selling them. Now, that's 10 million Americans with a felony conviction who can't get a good job, who can't get a regular paycheck. And that means they can't participate in a consumer-driven economy. Our economy is stalled. And it means that if I'm making cars in America and I want to sell cars, I've got fewer customers. Certainly my customer base in America as a manufacturer is much less than the customer base of my competitors in Japan and Germany, because they don't imprison people and they don't prosecute people for drugs at anything like the rate that America does.
Yes.
If you think about when America's auto industry was, the glory of Michigan and the Midwest and Detroit, we only had 250,000 people in all of our prisons. We have 10 times that number in prison now. We have 2.5 million people behind bars any day of the week. Well, those people didn't buy a new Ford or Chevrolet last year. So here we have young males, a key car-buying demographic, locked up, or if they've been released from jail, unable to get a job. And we wonder why Detroit is in the toilet, why we can't sell American cars, because we cut the throat of our purchasers.
Yeah, and, I think that a lot of people, I know before I read your article, 11 Ways the War on Drugs is Hurting Your Business, I didn't look at a lot of those aspects. I just wasn't aware. My focus was on other things. And this is so obvious, too. When I read your paper, it outlined things that should have been so obvious, but for whatever reason just escaped me. So I thought it was very important to have you on today to kind of outline the detailed aspects of how investors and even small business owners suffer as casualties of the failed war on drugs, which is really what it comes down to.
I wrote just a few weeks ago to the CEOs of America's largest corporations. I sent 125 letters to the presidents of Walmart and Apple and Microsoft and all the big corporations. And I said, look, ask your economic staff to research exactly how our drug policy is reducing the number of customers for your products, reducing the number of customers for the companies that you supply, and driving up your costs. Drug prohibition creates crime. It creates crime. The crime in the marketplace, the crime and violence we're seeing in Mexico is typical of what happens in a prohibition market. So that means if I'm a company, I have to have more security. It means I pay more insurance. The money that we're wasting in law enforcement on the order of $50 to $75 billion a year just fighting drugs is more money I'm paying in taxes. The neighborhoods where drugs are sold, the value of those neighborhoods is reduced so that the taxes that that property pays to the city or the county is reduced, which means that every other business has to pay more. It means that the opportunity to develop those neighborhoods is reduced. There are, just enormous numbers of costs that our society is facing economically. And my guess is If you have a mutual fund investment, I'm guessing that your investment is worth several percent a year less simply because of the economic drag that drug prohibition is creating on the economy and the companies that make up your portfolio.
Sure. Yeah, and then that's a staggering number. When it really is. It's significant. So.
Your members, the professionals who are listening to our interview, if they went to my website, business-council.org, the Business Council for Prosperity and Safety, they can download a copy of 11 Ways the War on Drugs is Hurting Your Business. They should join organizations like yours or Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. If students are listening, they should join Students for Sensible Drug Policy at the website schoolsnotprisons.org.
Right.
This is
which
a
are
very
great group.
Thank you. This is a very important issue for the future of our country and our children and the maintenance of our way of life. If our economy is destroyed, we're not going to have something for our children.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And I think when we take a look at countries that have adopted a more sensible drug policy, you can see the benefit. There's a lot of speculation that it would be detrimental to legalize drugs, all drugs, marijuana, whatever the case may be. There is an argument saying that it would be nothing but bad. But when you take a look at the models of the people
Jen, let me give you an example. More than 11 years ago, Portugal, after a very detailed study, decriminalized all drugs, all the narcotics. You can't be arrested for possession of cocaine or heroin or for being a drug addict. And they found that drug use went down and that crime went down. People went into treatment. They stopped stigmatizing people with drug problems. In Switzerland, they've had for close to 20 years now an experiment to provide heroin legally to addicts who couldn't be successful in an abstinence program. And the rate of AIDS infection went down, crime went down, homelessness went down, unemployment went up. The Swiss, the Swiss are justly deserved, for being very shrewd. Right now the Swiss franc is one of the strongest currencies in the world because people are investing in Switzerland, in the current financial crisis. These are examples of how a compassionate policy makes real economic and social sense. And it's not going to be all that long before our policy changes, but it's going to require a lot of political work of people who get it.
Right. And it's going to also require a lot of social work for people who have gotten it to educate their colleagues, their family, friends. So I think that's the utmost importance. Yeah.
I don't know how much more time we have today, but I wanted to say that I'm an active member of my Chamber of Commerce here in Silver Spring, Maryland. I've been active in the Parent-Teacher Association at my daughter's elementary school, and the people that I work with know what my views on drugs are. They elected me co-president of the PTA. When you are out of the closet, when you're straightforward about what these issues are, people will respect you and take you seriously and give you an opportunity to spread your message.
Eric, and I think that is the biggest hurdle right there. So many people are afraid of the stigma of coming out with their perspective on it, with the knowledge on it, because it is such a taboo subject. What advice would you have for them to ease their concerns about coming out and really bringing this issue into the light?